What's up, guys? We're in the dungeon and we are talking about glute development today. This has been on my mind for a while because I've been doing a lot of work on the posterior chain. I've been doing a lot of work on how to develop the hamstrings and the back and how to bring your deadlift up and how to increase hip extension. In addition to performance goals, which the glutes play a very vital role, many of you are also interested in glute development for aesthetic reasons, and you should be. You can't argue that it's shameful to have chicken legs and a big upper body while also ignoring your backside. So getting the glutes developed, it's a sign of a very powerful, capable human being. Just like they used to say, anybody who has a big upper back, that's the guy that somebody fears getting in a fight with, because that's a sign of real world functional strength, that it says that you can do a lot of things that other people can't do. So having the hindquarters of a mule is a good sign that you are just on another level from everybody else. So I want to show you some tips on how to develop your glutes if you are struggling with glute development. Hopefully some of these will help you out. Quick shout out to Barbell Apparel for sponsoring this channel. These shirts are fitted so nicely. They're doing quite a job in hiding the holiday pounds that I've gained. I'm absolutely a huge believer in this clothing company. I love their product. Go to barbellapparel.com/Bromley for 10% off the best training gear on the market. Trust me when I say you won't regret it. So the three things you need to know about the glutes: they extend the hip, and that's usually where we're trying to put our glutes into practice. When we squat, when we deadlift, anytime we bend over and then pick something up, the extension, the opening up of the hip is done by the glute, but it's also done by the hamstring. And we're going to get into how that can kind of interfere with glute development. It also abducts the knee, bringing the knee out to the side. And that's why we also associate wide stance stuff, sumo stuff with glute development, because the glute has to contract harder to keep everything out to the side. And it rotates the femur. So this external rotation is also something that's done by the glute. And there's actually a cue, I don't know if you've ever heard this, of like grabbing the ground with your feet and trying to like twist. That actually creates tension in the glutes. There was a squatter named Sam Bird who I had the pleasure of hearing speak at a seminar. He was a 900-pound squatter, I believe at 220. And he would talk about this cue where he would grip the ground with his toes and his feet like a monkey, and he would twist like he was trying to open 2 jars of peanut butter in the opposite direction. And that would create an immense amount of tension in his glutes. And he credited that for his massive squat that was like 200 pounds over his deadlift. He said he couldn't reproduce that tension in the deadlift. So that just goes to show how functional, how vital the glutes are in demonstrating strength and building strength. Just like a big bencher is going to want to crank down and use their lats to create that resistance, the glutes can be used the same way to create stopping power in a squat, and they're essential for locking out big deadlifts. So knowing those three things, we need to be able to put into practice a plan that is going to exploit every bit of those so we can create well-rounded glutes and make sure that they're activated. So I want to start out by talking about activation. So this has been controversial for some time. A lot of the guys with degrees that are like physical therapists will talk extensively about glute activation. And some of the other professionals, I think like Mike Israetel was on the wagon that glute activation wasn't really a thing. The only thing I care about is making sure that you know how to use your glutes when you're lifting, because we focus as lifters so much on movement patterns. And that's great. But if you get to a point where it's passable, and you're not paying attention to how each individual piece contributes to that movement pattern, it is entirely possible that certain structures take on more of the task than you would want them to, and you get stunted growth in other areas, and you can develop movement dysfunction that way. If we can train to make our nervous system more efficient and use muscles more efficiently, it stands to reason that you could be on the other end of that curve where you're actually not making good use of particular muscles. And I know when it comes to hip extension, a lot of people end up with this really messy, rounded back, hip extension, spine extension hybrid that doesn't have a clear hinge quality to it. And that's something I'm always beating the drum on. So somebody that has good glute activation is going to be able to hinge well. Think of the deadlifters that get stuck 2 inches from lockout. They're usually guys that pull with a rounded back. They're usually guys that pull very explosively and rely on momentum to get the bar up above their knee. And then once they're under tension, the bar slowed down and they have to rely on the glutes to get the hips through. Then that's where they run into trouble. So having a handle on a good, clean hinge is a big component. In addition to that, you want to be able to feel the glute squeeze. So step one of getting your ass to grow is to clench your ass. This is thing number one. It sounds stupid, but just like you get your pecs really bouncy and you can kind of twitch them after a bunch of bench presses, you want to look for that twitchiness in your glutes. And if you don't have a concept of how to use them to kind of grab, build tension and hold tension, you're never going to make the most out of them. So if you're having trouble getting your glutes to grow, clench your ass. Do it when you're standing, do it when you're seated, do it at the top of your movements, at the top of squats and deadlifts. Try to do it at the bottom. If you can be in a deep hinge position, squatted down or bent over in a deadlift, and you can feel tension in your glutes before you lift, you are going to be able to build so much more pressure at the bottom, apply so much more force. You're going to be so much stronger, and you're going to be able to carry that lift through to lockout much, much better. So that's thing number one. If you've watched any of the bracing or posture videos I've done with regards to setting up for a deadlift, you know how important I think a neutral spine is, and the glutes are part of that. You bring the ribs down to tighten up the midsection. So the abdominals are a string. You're shortening them down by bringing the ribs, and then you squeeze the glutes to bring your hips under. And that sets your pelvis at neutral. So it's just like a plank position, which is just like the top of a kettlebell swing. When you snap to lockout, you're finding that hip snap at the top, just like you're in a plank where the glutes are tight, the hips are neutral, and it was pure hip extension. The spine didn't move, the hip snapped forward by virtue of the glutes contracting. So clench, clench, clench. Step two is going to be using exercises that teach you how to clench better. So glute activation exercises are usually what we think of. Clamshells are extremely good for this. That's just where you're lying on the ground and you're engaging in knee abduction. You can actually use the abduction machine, which people will crudely call the bad girl machine, but that focuses on the glute roll of abduction, which a lot of us don't really focus on. We don't really utilize that. So that might be a good roundabout way to find a way to feel your glutes and get them engaged where they haven't really been before. You can get some good development by focusing on that, and that might help you build tension in your squat and deadlifts and help you conceptualize that tension as you try to get your knees out and hold position. So some of the best options are going to be glute bridges. You can do it with a barbell, a dumbbell, single leg, two leg. There are a bunch of ways to do it. I actually like to rock up onto my heels because you tend to feel it just a little bit more in the glutes. But as you rock your hips up to lockout, the point where the muscle is most fully contracted is a point where you are the most disadvantaged. That's actually not the case with squats and deadlifts. The point where the glute is fully contracted is a point where you are mechanically in the most advantaged position. So flipping that on its head, you do a glute bridge and you learn how to squeeze. And the point where the glutes are squeezed the most, that's the only way that you can sustain that lockout. So I recommend starting with body weight. I recommend holding at the top. Again, practice clenching. And then I recommend slowly progressing with weight. Again, not focusing just on the movement pattern, on just arbitrarily getting your hips up, but by focusing on that handle that you get. You feel that point of purchase where the glutes actively extend you to lockout. If you can do that and then work up in weight to the point where you're handling substantial poundages, even small female lifters, underweight lifters can usually handle 300-400 pounds in this movement. So by the time you can get up to weight in this movement with that control and sensation, you're gonna have a pretty nasty pair of gluteals on you. Every gym usually has at the very least a 45-degree back extension. You can also use a glute ham deck to do your back extensions on. That's kind of like a glute bridge, but in reverse. Same idea. At the very top, the glutes have to do the most amount of work. It's just a little harder usually to take your lower back, your hamstrings out of this movement. Now, one trick that I like to do to get people to feel their glutes that I've had a lot of success with, get in a 45-degree back extension and hold the extended position. Instead of just cycling through and getting a pump in your low back, hold the position, hold onto a weight plate and try to hold for 30, 45 seconds, a minute, and you're gonna be surprised at how quickly your ass starts burning. A good idea is to use that as a warm-up to get a little bit of receptivity, feel those muscles firing off, and then go into your actual reps that move you through the full stretch shortening cycle, and you're gonna be amazed at how much more you feel your glutes on each rep. And again, you may get harder by holding for a brief pause at the top. You can work the eccentric on the way down, again, applying that clenching ability, that mind-muscle connection every rep of the way. Step 3 is going to be taking these exercises, and there's a million of them. It doesn't matter which ones you settle on, but as you build up that skill and you learn how to utilize those muscles and maintain tension throughout the movement, The big one, the one that's gonna set you up for life, is to apply that skill to every other exercise you ever do. So that when you do your squatting and deadlifting multiple times per week, when you do any of your lower body accessory, your unilateral work, you're applying that tension, you're applying that skill you now have with recruiting that muscle to everything you do. You might find that you can use it to build more tension in your squat. You might find that you can get your hips to contribute more aggressively in your deadlift lockout. And by virtue of doing that, you're going to continuously build and develop your glutes for as long as you're lifting, and they will no longer become a weak point. So that's all I got for today, guys. Let me know what you think. Let me know what problems you've run into with glute development. Let me know what's worked for you. Have you had any success with this stuff? Leave it in the comments, or better yet, take it to Patreon. That's where I upload my training daily with commentary, so you can see how I put these principles into action in real time. Also, don't forget to check out Kong. It is free on the Boost Camp app. Savage size in 12 weeks. I'm looking forward to the feedback on that program. We already have a lot of people running it, so I'm excited to see what the reviews are. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Till next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.